Good morning, everybody. This is another Branson Legacy Sabbath School meeting, and we are having an interesting presentation to get today. Dr. Sigve Tonstad is with us again, so I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion. And I hope that in this discussion, we are going to be blessed and that we are going to get to a better understanding of our topic, which is the book of Revelation. Dana, could you please lead us in prayer and introduction? Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad you referred to Dr. Tonstad as Dr. Sigve Tonstad, because in the small world of the Adventists and in Loma Linda in the medical field, there are two famous Dr. Tonstad, Dr. Sigve Tonstad and his wife Serena. And in the much bigger world of contemporary theology, there are also two Dr. Tonstads, Dr. Sigve Tonstad and his daughter Lynn Tonstad, who is a professor and an author, very well received in contemporary theology. So welcome, Dr. Sigve Tonstad. Thank you for being today with us. Thank you for your presentation. Who, what, where, why. Now, I received some very compelling words of presentation from Dave Larson, so I cannot help but bring them to you. Whether John the Revelator and John the Disciple are the same person is an important question, writes Dave Larson. Whether John the Revelator's message has nothing larger than the Roman Empire in view is a more important question. Whether the book of Revelation is misogynistic, it's an even more important question. Whether it celebrates violence is more important yet. Whether it pictures God as a monster is the most important question of all. Both in his commentary on Revelation and in his YouTube series of videos on rereading Revelation, Dr. Sigve Tonstad addresses all of these issues and more. His work is meticulous, surprising, and exhaustively in touch with past and current scholarship. And this is no surprise, I would say, because as a physician, he is trained to look at the bigger picture and treat the whole person. As a theologian, he thinks beyond dates and times. He looks at the overarching themes of Bible and human history. And also, I would add, as a professor, he brings to us, a God that is personal, and he makes the Bible story come alive in front of our eyes. This is what I admire the most in his teaching. His theological perspective and position are engaging and exciting, and in the same time, they are also challenging for some SDAs and non-SDAs alike. However, those who resist his writings are usually those who are resistant to new ways of looking at things. And of course, Dr. Larson reassures us that there is no need to worry. Learning new things about the Bible or anything else won't hurt our spiritual life. Never doing so most certainly will. In addition to its exhaustive detail and massive interaction with other scholars, Sigve Tonstad's commentary on Revelation is unique in that it provides an alternative to both the idea that its purpose is to offer pinpointed predictions of important events up to and beyond to the second coming of Jesus, which is the historicist on one hand, and the idea that its purpose was only to encourage the earliest Christians who were ostensibly being persecuted by the Roman Empire. Dr. Tonstad does this by portraying the book as primarily being about what he calls cosmic conflict and what the SDAs call the great controversy or the drama of ages. If I could make up a label for this alternative, writes Dr. Larson, it would be theodicies. This is because he rightly points out that the cosmic conflict is about the character of God, and theodicy is the study of whether it is possible to continue to believe in a loving God in view of all the evil in the world. And finally, let's end with a beautiful quote from his book. The cross is as much about theodicy, vindicating the character of God, as it is about soteriology, salvation for humans. Thank you for this beautiful quote, Dr. Tonstad. And the Bible reading that you suggested for today is Revelation 21, 1-9, 16, and 17, which contains one of my favorite verses in all the Bible. And it reads, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.' He said to me, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb.' The city was laid out like a square, as long as it was wide. He measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length, and as wide and high as it was long. The angel measured the wall using human measurement, and it was 144 cubits thick." Let's pray. Our gracious God, we come to you in humility, recognizing that our thoughts and our understanding are as far from your thoughts as our planet is from the farthest star in the galaxy. And yet, you are walking with us in the valley of the shadows. You are holding our hand. You are comforting us in difficult times. And you gave us the beautiful promise that one day you will wipe every tears from our eyes. And death will be no more. This is what we are looking forward to. And this is where our hope lays. Thank you for loving us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dana. Lisa, could you please start the video for us?
Yes, and please let me know if anything doesn't work right.
Welcome to the third presentation in our series, Rereading Revelation. And this time we're still doing some preliminaries. So we want to know who was involved in the creation of this book, what the book might be, what we should call it, where it happened, when it happened, and a very difficult question, why? So these are big items, but they are preliminaries. We will begin with the who question. And we are given quite a bit to work with on the who question. Already in verse 1, we have a name of a human being here. So the he is God, God in the sort of sending end of it. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. So here is John. And then John writes to the 7 believing communities, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. And Asia, that's Asia Minor, that's Turkey. And then again, he will say something about himself. I, John, your brother who share with you in Jesus the trials. I was on the isle called Patmos. So there is the where question answered too. And then at the end of the book, all of these are in chapter 1, and here is one from the last chapter. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. So this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? And here in an iconographic illustration, here he is in his cave, and here in Greek letters, it's John, Johanno, and he is known in the church tradition as the theologian. So he is theologos here, and receiving the revelation here. And there is a cave at Patmos that people frequent, thinking that that could be the location. So we have some questions now, and we are going to look at the internal evidence, the book looking at the New Testament and especially the Gospels. So was he John, the son of Zebedee, known in the Gospels? Because there is a John in the Gospels. He is a very important person. Is the John of Revelation that John? And second question, is that John identical with the beloved disciple in the Gospel of John, or the Gospel attributed to John? The source and the author of that Gospel. So in the Gospel attributed to John, the author is referred to as the beloved disciple, but never as John. So is the beloved disciple John? And is John then the author of both of these books? And here in Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, we have a scene with the beloved disciple. He's identified as the beloved disciple sitting next to Jesus, Peter leaning over to him, asking, who is it who will betray Jesus? That is the scene here. And then 5 times in the Gospel of John, we hear about the beloved disciple, but we are never told that the beloved disciple was John. So this is then a conundrum, or a knot, as it were. And then my third point, if the answer to number 2 is yes, that the beloved disciple is John, the son of Zebedee, then is I John? We solved the identity of the beloved disciple. Is that John, the John of Revelation? And most people, most scholars today do not think so. And there is not agreement on many of these points. The main reason why people don't think so is because the language is so different. There is a different linguistic tenor, texture to the language in these books, but there is significant thematic continuity, overlap. And I just want to show 3 items there, comparing notes, comparing these 2 books. There is a very prominent theme of cosmic conflict. Let's just say that the Gospel of John and the book of Revelation feature a cosmic perspective to a far greater degree than any other book in the New Testament. That's a fact. And here in the fourth gospel, we read in what is really the main thing in the story, Jesus speaking, now is the critical moment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be expelled. And he uses a word in Greek, ekballo, to throw out, or to unveil, to unmask, to expose. It can also mean it's a telling verb in the context of the fourth gospel. And look here, in the context of Revelation, in also a scene that is pivotal in the book, the great dragon was expelled, ekballo again. That ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world, he was expelled, ekballo, once more to the earth. So these two books are united in their emphasis of the theme of cosmic conflict, and with some word elements that are quite telling, that are quite suggestive, that someone who thought in the similar manner and for some key issues used the same vocabulary is at work here. So let's do two other ones. One more. The theme of witness here in the fourth gospel. Jesus is on trial before Pilate in Jerusalem, and Pilate then said to him, then you are not a king, are you? Or you are a king. Are you a king? That's one can discuss that translation. Jesus answered, and this is what matters. You say that I am a king. For this task I was born. I don't know why I have a mistake there. I'm sorry about that. For this task I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to witness, martyreso, to the truth. So here the language of witness describing, identifying the mission of Jesus as a witness to the truth. And here in the book of Revelation, here we have also a cosmic conflict, as we pointed out already, and here, and filled with rage against a woman. The dragon went away to make war against the rest of her seed, those who keep the commandments of God as revealed by the witness of Jesus, martyrion, Jesu. So they have in common the theme of witness, and witness is a form of revelation. So that there is a revelatory tenor in both of these books. And a third one. This one, in my view, is the most telling, most revealing. This is a kind of giveaway, almost. Here in the fourth gospel, very typical Johannine way of thinking. Jesus is praying in chapter 17 here. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me. I call that the theme of mutual indwelling, the sort of reciprocity relationship described from the two sides of the relationship. And then it's a little different, but it is similar enough that we can hear it. Here is the last message to the 7 believing communities and the end of that message to Laodicea. And Jesus says, if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, her, and he, she with me. Here it is I in you and you in me. Here it is I with him and he or she with me. Those are ways of thought, habits of expression that seems to suggest common ground as we compare notes between these books, and I could give quite a few others as well. So moving now from what we call internal evidence to external evidence, looking at what people have said, and we will look at at Irenaeus, who wrote a book against heresies. Irenaeus was born in one of the cities of Asia Minor in the year AD 140, and wrote somewhat later than that, toward the end of the second century. And this is what he will say, and now reflecting on the church tradition, early church tradition. So first he says, lastly, John, who was the disciple of the Lord, who had leant back on his breast, remember Leonardo and the Last Supper, once more set forth the gospel while residing in Ephesus in Asia. So here Irenaeus claims that the gospel of John, or the gospel attributed to John, is written by John, the son of Zebedee. So, and he wrote it while he was in Ephesus. And Ephesus is not far from the island of Patmos. That's number one. And then he will say, John beheld the apocalyptic vision. That's the book of Revelation. For that was seen not very long time since, but almost in our day, towards the end of Domitian's reign, toward the end of the 1st century. So Irenaeus claims then that these two books are written by the same person, that the John of Revelation is John, the son of Zebedee. And that's the tradition. And here, this is from the Deus Apocalypse, these amazing illustrations found in a book from the 13th century, 1270 or so. And here the angel delivers a message to John, and he listens very carefully. He is on Patmos, and here the Strait of Bosporus is identified here in the text. These people really were serious about what they were doing. Austin Ferrer says something that I think is quite to the point. His name, John, is enough. He writes as if there were no other John. And that makes it simpler. So which John is it then that is so famous, so well known? And which John, what sort of character would he have to be capable of this? So I say in my commentary that if we had two different authors, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. But it is harder to believe in two different authors than in one, because these books are so amazing that to find one is really more plausible than to find two. So many won't agree with me on that one, but we will move on. We will go to where? And here, I, John, your brother, who shared with you in Jesus the trials, was on the island called Patmos. So that island is known, we know where it is, and many people have traveled there. It is a very small island. It is here in the Aegean Sea between Turkey and Greece. And the island is here. So there it is. And you see that the city of Ephesus is close by, and the city of Smyrna, both cities of Revelation. And just to put us in perspective here, there is Athens, and here is Istanbul, major cities in our time. It's the real world. It's a real place. Maybe it really happened. That's the context. Certainly the author is giving us place, not maybe less time, but he's certainly giving us location and to some extent occasion. And so to a harder question, the question of what? What kind of book is it? That is what we are asking here, because and this has been a major topic in scholarship. And again, we will read Revelation 1:1, the first verse. The revelation, the apocalypsis of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to make known to his servants what must soon take place. He made it known, and there Revelation uses a special word, the word seimino. He made it known in symbolic language by sending his angel to his servant John. That's the whole verse. And the key word here that has caught scholars' attention is the word apocalypse, apocalypsis. So is that a word for what? For genre, for a certain kind of literature. So the literal meaning of the word, and here you have to see it full illustration first. It is a veiling and an unveiling. That revelation means that you unveil something. Let's do it again with me not standing in the way here. Something is veiled, hidden, and then it is unveiled, and we have a revelation. And the hiddenness that precedes the revelation is important. It's part of the issue. And here we hear echoes of the book of Daniel. Daniel, who was a captive in Babylon, and who interpreted the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and who had visions himself. And especially this dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had, and this is Michelangelo's illustration of the prophet Daniel, or the seer Daniel. This is found in the Sistine Chapel in Rome. So just someone's imagination here. But much of the language that we have in Revelation 1:1 is are echoes from the book of Daniel, and especially from Daniel 2. He makes known, apokalypto in Greek. He knows, ginosko in Greek. You have made known, seimaino. That is the word we have in the mode of communication in Revelation 1:1. You have made known, gnorizo, to make something known. There is a God in heaven who makes known, apokalypto. So the language in Daniel in Revelation is clearly influenced by Daniel, and by pointing back to a message of Revelation. And Greg Beale, who is a major Revelation scholar, has written a very good and massive commentary on the book of Revelation. He says something that I think we can readily agree with, that there is a connection between form and meaning. The word in Revelation 1:1 could mean merely make known or communicated, and thus refer to a general idea of communication and not to the particular mode of communication. Communication only, or also a certain mode of communication. The fact, however, that Revelation 1:1 is an allusion to Daniel 2:28, 29, and 45 confirms that here the word does mean symbolize. So there is communication in symbolic language. That is what we have so far on the what question, the apocalyptic question. But what's the connection between symbol and meaning? How do you do that? And here I will have two words that sound similar, and they are quite similar, even though some dictionaries list them as antonyms, as words with opposing meaning. To many people, maybe most readers of Revelation, we have a book where symbol means code, and you have to decode it. You have to find what does that term refer to in real life. So you decode the book, and one person, a good scholar in my community, has written a book on decoding Revelation's trumpets, for instance. So here you convert a coded message into intelligible form. That's decoding. And here is a statement taken from a dictionary. The secret documents were intercepted and decoded. Right? That's the decoding approach to explain the connection between symbol and meaning. For instance, we have a number 666 in Revelation 13:18, and an exhortation in that verse to understand what word means. And the decoders, and they will go to work and say that that number is a coded expression, coded numerical expression for a real person. Most preterists think this is the Emperor Nero. 666 is code for the Emperor Nero. Other people committed to decoding will not agree with that necessarily, but they will find some other person corresponding or some other reality corresponding to the number 666 or 666. The other word is a little more tricky, but it's a better word, to encode. And here is not encode to write a code. That is not the meaning. It's really more in the sort of medical or biological sense I wish to use this term. A gene responsible for producing a substance or behavior. We have the genetic code. And that code is a form of communication, a form of messaging in the biological world. So let's do it on a even more complicated thing. I take it that our literacy here is not too bad because of the COVID pandemic that is happening as we speak, and that will be remembered for some time because we have heard about RNA viruses, and here we have the term RNA. Listen to this one. Each nucleotide, that's the DNA or triplet or codon on the mRNA chain encodes a specific amino acid. So here you have a certain language written in messenger RNA that is the code for a certain amino acid, and amino acids are building blocks for protein. And yes, our COVID-19 virus operates here in this territory. It carries the code for making messages, mostly a code to make more and more and more viruses and copy itself and make havoc in the world. But here we have a code as a message, as a kind of language, and to understand that language is what we are aiming for here. And here you have it in the meaning that I am interested in, the capacity of poetry to encode ideology. You write something in symbolic language, you write something in poetic language, and it is meant to convey a certain message, to leave a certain impression. Encode here means in some ways to inscribe something, to facilitate understanding of something, not in the sense of decoding a message, but in the sense of using a body of literature, the Old Testament, the visions of John, to open to our world a message in that seeks to encode itself in us, in our human reality, as it were. Maybe this was a little hard, but my understanding of this book is not that it needs decoding, and that the number 666 is a numerical code for a certain person. It doesn't work quite that way. It is a message, an opening to a world where we are given certain understanding, and the message will be encoded in our minds, our thoughts, maybe even in our ways of living. Now, having said all of that, there is a making known, a simple sort of revelatory thrust here, and it is very big. It is very emphatic here in the beginning of the word. We have in chapter 1, verse 1, apocalypsis, God gave, and then we have these terms, apocalypsis, didomi, deknymi, and seimaino. That's the vocabulary. All of those terms really do say that we have a God who makes known, he makes known, he makes known, he makes known. Very many synonyms, the whole dictionary, as it were, of the sort of theme of making known. And going back to Daniel, we will read these texts again, just to see the melody here of the kind of claim that Daniel makes when he faces King Nebuchadnezzar at the highest level of society in the ancient world. Daniel says about God, he makes known, apocalypto, he knows. You have made known, that is God. You have made known, and again, you have made known, 2:23. There is a God in heaven who makes known, apocalypto again. That's a claim he makes for the book of Daniel. This is the claim we also make for the book of Revelation, that there is a God in heaven who communicates with people. What sort of literature is it? It's that kind of literature. And the revealer, the known maker of mysteries, disclose to you what is to be. So here, and this is another illustration from the Jews' apocalypse, there's a God in heaven who opens books and makes known. That is the trick here. And in an expansion of this same illustration, God gives to Jesus the apocalypse that is by Jesus and about Jesus. He gives it to his angel, and his angel gives it to John. That's how they do it. And this is well done for our illustration. Daniel bequeaths to Revelation the language of apocalypse. The first verses in Revelation are sated with terms widely used in the story of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That story is itself the go-to story of knowledge that does not originate in the human realm. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He cannot remember it. It didn't originate in his head. It is a message from outside. That's the point. It is knowledge we cannot generate on our own. Daniel then, and now Revelation, rests on the conviction that God communicates with human beings. There is a revealer and no-maker in heaven. That is the basic thing here. And this needs to be contrasted to conception in our time, where the notion of a God who reveals things is faded. And here is the interpretation of dreams and visions. We have Joseph in the Old Testament, we have Daniel in the Old Testament, and we have Sigmund Freud in the 20th century. And not to disparage of these, but here is Freud, who is on a stamp with many different countries in the world, because he did in some ways set the terms, define the terms for what is knowable and what is not knowable, what can be known, what cannot be known. Listen to what he says in his book, Interpretation of Dreams, from the year 1900. Our scientific consideration of dreams starts off from the assumption that they are products of our own mental activity. So the second point in Freud's paradigm or pattern follows from the first. So here is what he says. We are not in general in a position to interpret another person's dream unless he is prepared to communicate to us the unconscious thought that lie behind its content. And that is logical, because if all knowledge comes from our own heads, then the source of that knowledge will have to be conveyed, will have to be communicated from there. So here, of course, Daniel and Revelation, they both contest that view. They say there is knowledge that doesn't originate in our heads, and therefore knowledge, that type of knowledge can be communicated by some other source. So Nebuchadnezzar cannot remember his dream, but Daniel can know it, even if Nebuchadnezzar cannot remember it. That is the strange thing. That is a different conception of reality, conception of what is knowable. And here is the last one, the third one. It will no doubt have surprised all of us to be told that dreams are nothing other than fulfillment of wishes, and not only on account of the contradiction offered by anxiety dreams. And Freud says that in various ways. So we have three things here: knowledge only in your own head, knowledge that needs to be communicated from the one whose head has that knowledge, and then that the knowledge is wish fulfillment. It's none of the above in Daniel and Revelation. There is knowledge outside the human head, and that can be communicated some other way. And there is also the notion that not everything is wish fulfillment. Sometimes there is truth that comes out. We didn't want it. We didn't want to know that. And likewise, there may be some things that we would like to know that can be known only by revelation. So the books of Daniel and Revelation, of course, the Bible as a whole, contests the worldview that has been bequeathed to us from Freud and others in the 19th or 20th century. And I think that is one of the major services of this book, to bring us back into another view of reality like the one we have in Revelation. So apocalypsis, then, the word for revelation, means that something is opened to us that is not knowable by normal means. That opening word has become the word for a literary genre. We call it apocalyptic literature. And it has also given rise to other concepts: an apocalyptic community, a group of people that has a certain expectation, even an apocalyptic mindset and worldview. The mindset and worldview is generally that the world is going to end soon. And so these are important terms in the scholarly literature. So genre is important, and the notion that there is an apocalyptic genre is not false, but it is risky to apply that to the book of Revelation, that the book of Revelation doesn't fit the genre. Why is it important? Well, we have the genre of fact and we have the genre of fiction. I sometimes mention that my brother tends to like historical novels and reads them, and historical novels is interesting, but it's not the same as history written by an academic historian. So you read a historical novel different from the way you read history. And there is a genre that is academic, scholarly, and there is popular literature, and those are different genres, and you come to that type of literature with different expectations. So that is important here. And the concluding point, that apocalyptic as genre did not exist when John wrote Revelation, and he was not thinking, well, I'm writing something that is in a certain genre now. That doesn't work. So I can then say that determination of genre is useful if we get it right. But it is worse than useless if we get it wrong, because then it sets us off in a wrong direction. So that would not be good. So let's try to find ways to illustrate this, to look beyond notions of genre to what is actually happening, how God relates to us, how we relate to God. So we could say, well, we have the why of the book of Revelation. That's what we're talking about. The why of the book of Revelation is grounded in our wish to know. We come to God, we want to know. Please tell us, please explain. That is one way of looking at it. Or we could say, well, it is not that way. It is really God's disposition to make something known. That is how it works. That we are not the initiator, as it were, and then we would have God pulling the curtain aside and telling us, I want you to know. That's the kind of person I am. And I have one more illustration or contrast here. So here is an initiative from below. Here is me or a human being, and I knock on the door. Let's say that it is the heaven's door. Knock, knock, knock on heaven's door, hoping that it will open. And I am asking for access, again, with an initiative from below. Or this one, the initiative comes from above. God initiates the action. God opens the door. God actually comes on our side of the door and inviting us to come in. And which one works best for the world of Revelation? Clearly, the initiative from above. We could even say that this one, my illustration of the initiative from below, fits the world of Revelation if we take it to the messages to the 7 communities, and the last message, the one to Laodicea, and that depicts Jesus. And he says, I am standing at the door. I have taken up my position at the door, and I stand there knocking. And if anyone opens the door, I will come in. So whose initiative is it? Well, whether by the illustration here or by that view of this illustration, it's an initiative from above. The why of Revelation is from above and not from below. I don't think that can be said strongly enough. And here, then, as a conclusion, God's disposition to let us know exceeds our wish to know. That is how we could conclude, and that takes us into the why of Revelation better than any other view. I'd like to pursue this into the heartland of biblical conceptions of how these matters work, the deep roots of Revelation's why. And this goes to the heart of the Abrahamic faiths. Abraham as a foundational figure in the way God relates to the world. And God has a meeting with Abraham over the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, that are notoriously corrupt cities. And then there is a dialogue, a kind of internal dialogue. God has a dialogue with himself. And the question is asked in the book of Genesis, shall I hide from Abraham that which I do? And the translation of that which I do should here be that which I do, not merely on this occasion, but as a regular practice. Shall I hide from humans, from Abraham, the way I do things? That's what we are hearing God saying. And then God answers, no, I'm not going to hide it, for I have known him. There is a relationship of reciprocity, of insight. And this is borne out in this book by Thomas Pangle, and it is borne out in this article by Timothy Lytton, Shall Not the Judge of the Earth Do Justly? And I have pursued it quite vigorously in my book, God of Sense and Traditions of Nonsense, where you have an option between a God who communicates sensibly to humans or a God who is inscrutable and beyond access. So these are concepts then, and Revelation fits that concept. Transparency, the concept of God and divine transparency as a paradigm. So, if we look at Revelation then as divine transparency, it comes to us to remedy the problem of ignorance. That's what are many things we don't know, and certainly many things we don't know about God. And to remedy the problem of concealment, because there is an other side to the story that hides its true intentions, and to remedy the problem of slander, that there is another side that misrepresents God. So there is ignorance, there is concealment, and there is slander. How can we get out of that predicament? How can we solve it? And this is then where the literal meaning of Revelation as uncovering, to take off the veil and remove the veil, in some ways is an illustration that works for all these problems: ignorance, concealment, and slander. This has particular relevance in our time too, and I am not wanting you to overinterpret my illustration here, but you may have types of communication that bills itself as fair and balanced, but it isn't fair and balanced. It's fake news. It's a fake news channel, and Revelation is very much aware of that. Not just the fake news channels of our time, but the fake news channel of all times, as it were. And so the remedy for that is the remedy of Revelation. So again, then, Revelation is God's remedy for the problem of fake news. And in Revelation, again, you have battle lines drawn, you have two sides, you have a cosmic conflict. There is war waged here on this side by means of slander and deceit, and God countering the reality of slander and deceit by means of revelation. It's quite consistent and very important. So to draw up some things by way of bullet points here before we finish, here is the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. And what does Revelation say? Well, for the who is John, calls him John. For the what, there is revelation. The book is a revelation. It is an apocalypse. The where is Patmos off the coast of Turkey. The why is late 1st century. There is good consensus about that. And the why, the most important question, and here I take a different view from many who read this, that the reason for this book is that access and transparency are embedded in the kind of person God is. That is the main thing. So I like to broaden these points by way of summary or conclusions. Revelation is mediated by John, as if there is only one John. So the genre of the book is important, but the word apocalypse is not meant to specify genre at the time when the book was written, and determination of genre comes with a risk if we get it wrong. Number 3, John was on the island Patmos when he received the revelation. No reason to argue about that, and maybe he was there most likely because of hardship. And it is likely that the revelation was seen, as Irenaeus puts it, toward the end of the reign of the Emperor Domitian, and his reign ended in AD 96. And then to the why question, we have the book, primarily because God is a revealer, a God committed to transparency. And the genre of Revelation, then, is not the genre of crisis literature, some situation that generates it. that is too simplistic. The genre of Revelation is not the genre of crisis literature. It is a book belonging to the literary family of the God who reveals.
So, thank you very much, Lisa. It is about 11:28, and if everybody agrees, I think we should take a break now and come back around 11:40 to continue with our discussion. So see you in about 12 minutes. Thank you. So I think it was a very interesting presentation that we all learned quite a bit. But I have a question for you, Sigve. So if this is a question of transparency, if it's a question of God trying to prevent our ignorance, why is it so difficult to understand?
Well, yeah. Should I accept the premise of your question, or should I contest the premise of your question? Should I say it is difficult to understand, or should I say that it isn't? I suppose I have to accept the premise of the question that it is difficult, but when a book bills itself as a revelation and promises a blessing to those who read it and take it to heart, I have to believe that the person who has, or the initiator of this book, meant it to be clear and meant it to be comprehensible, and in some ways I think there is a kind of modeling of understanding inside the book itself. So yeah. What shall I say? Why is it so difficult to understand it? It will take some effort to understand it. I will concede that. I think that and that it is a book that is open to rereaders. That rereading this book is quite necessary, and I think I have said in one of my presentations that this book is for rereaders only. And since it draws so much on the Old Testament, then to make sense of it, we have to come along into the world of the Old Testament, and that John, of course, was extremely and deeply immersed in the Old Testament, and maybe the book invites us to participate in a similar immersion into the Old Testament. So there are certain prerequisites. I do grant that, and I suppose we could say, well, that makes it difficult. So I guess that would be my answer. Yes, but yes, difficult. Yes, but.
And one of the issues, I think, maybe that our vocabulary has changed thanks to the popular genre that is kind of backdating and being applied on a revelation that was never meant to be that way. Don't you see? That is a problem occasionally.
Yes, I think that is a very good point, that in our time, especially in what we call futurist readings, that speculates in applying it to specific events, and that also depicts the message of the book as a very violent message, that has been a deterrent. That certainly is one of the reasons why Revelation is not a popular book in Europe. it's also because in Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, the leading reformers did not think much of the book of Revelation. They did not find support for their understanding of the gospel, justification by faith, and so on. So that Revelation speaks to us about God in another idiom, and that idiom was not the one that Protestant theology felt at home in. So that is also a deterrent. So I think we have some obstacles. We have to sort of clear the path. The Revelation sets before us an open door, but how do you get to that door? You know, how do you sort of clear away the debris and all the commotion and the obstacles to finding that door? And I think those are real challenges. I do.
Thank you. McKinley, we have some people, so asking questions, please take away.
Okay, thank you, Simona. So I am hoping as we start this question and answer and discussion phase of the class, that you have lots of questions for Dr. Tonstad, giving this excellent presentation. The presentation not only covers the topics of Revelation, but how God interacts with humans. It also talks about current notions of whether God communicates with humans. And I think to just broaden that idea, prayer also falls into this category as well. The presentation clarifies the authorship of the book, which the two last presentations also covered. You will recall from Dr. Collins's presentation. She presented a different perspective about the authorship of the book of Revelation. The presentation frames the message of Revelation in an integral framework across four categories, at least as I've observed: the cosmic, the global, the communal, referring to the community of believers, and the personal. So as you think about questions to ask Dr. Sigve, do think about these categories. His presentation insists on the transparency of God. And in this conversation with Simona, he suggests that we can benefit from this transparency by studying. So here is your framework for your questions. And I see there are 3 hands up. And 4 hands up. I will follow Monty's practice of alternating between our brothers and sisters. And I will recognize Brother Rodney first. And then next, I think will be Sister Alexander. Anastasia. Please remember to keep your comments and questions brief. If you have some additional, I'll come back to you. But Rodney, you have the mic.
Yeah, thank you, Sigve. I have 2 questions. One I'm going to wait on, but the first question is, do we know what impact that the book of Revelation had on in Asia Minor on the 7 churches? Is there any compendium of thought that might have been written over the next 100 years or so of how did they receive this message and what did they do with it?
Well, what should I say? I mean, that I think I have to say I don't know because I don't. So there is a kind of hyper particularity to the messages to the 7 churches, John to the 7 churches which are in Asia Minor, and then it says to the 7 churches, but there are many more than 7 churches in Asia Minor, many more. So should one understand? I know that my good friend Dave Larson has written something recently that this book was obviously addressed to the 7 churches in Asia Minor, and who is to contest that? But there is I start my exposition of the chapter to the 7 churches by saying beware of hyperbole, because there is a kind of repetitiveness, that it is repetitious, it is in some way stereotypical. There is a pattern in all the churches that makes you wonder, and there is a pattern, but the specifics inside that pattern are quite, I mean, some phenomena are called different things, but he's obviously talking about the same thing. So I wonder if even that part should be understood symbolically. So is it describing the situations in specific terms in the Church of Ephesus? Is it in Sardis or one of the other churches, that there are those who say that they are Jews but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan? Is that specific to a town? Is that a way to talk about faith communities in a city in Asia Minor, and some faith communities, to disparage them like that? Some people have thought this is, he's describing the Jews in Sardis or in the synagogue of Satan. There are two, that is mentioned twice. Is this addressing the specific situation in Asia Minor, or is it in some ways symbolic for the church, not in a historicist sense, but in a kind of general sense, to help us think and meditate in a way that is not reflecting the realities in Asia Minor? I have some concerns about that. I cannot answer your question. If he meant to address and remedy problems in those cities, I think we might have to say we don't know how it went. That's
Okay.
I would be.
That's fair response. Thank you. McKinley, I'll wait on my second question to come around the next time around. Let others get their questions.
Thank you, Rodney. I appreciate that. Sister Anastasia, please
Thank you.
ask your question or comment
I'll be short
and
and
be
then,
brief.
Yeah. First of
Thank
all,
you.
I want to welcome Dr. Tonstad and really thank him so much. I'm still reading your book about God's sense, or I forget the title, and the nonsense of et cetera, et cetera. And I really appreciate so much that with your scholarship and your education, you are trying, and I think you are proving many times, that God is a God of sense. Saying that, I need two questions. One more thing. I know that Dr. Hayes was you have told me, one of your inspirations or teacher. And the book that I have, and I spoke with him many years ago and I heard him speak, was about, it was titled Moral Issues of the New Testament. And from what I remember, one of his methods is, in searching for the nature of God, is to go from the New Testament, and I don't think he had Revelation in mind, I don't know, to the Old Testament. And those things that were in conflict with God's nature, then it was not God's revelation, but rather cultural or man-made. Do you think that maybe that's, and I'm sorry, we were not here, I haven't heard you in your previous lectures. That's one. So do you think that the revelation reveals the true nature of God, or is it in opposite, totally opposite of what was revealed by Jesus? And the other thing is, do you think, I know there are some very inspirational points there in the book of Revelation, but there are some horrific ones about the nature of God. And do you believe that the means justify the end, or that the end, the purpose of God was good, but we can employ any kind of means? Wasn't Hitler very much like that? And the other thing, maybe to respectfully about the others, the seven churches, Irenaeus was one, and he won with the main fathers of that time to establish and put the book of Revelation in the canon. Nevertheless, what we call the Alexandrians, like Philo And then the Christian Dionysius of Alexandria and the Alexandrines were very much against Hieronymus' interpretation. And I have to say, although this book is in the canon of the Orthodox Church, and I believe the Anglican and Episcopalian or Anglican, in the Orthodox Church, never is any preaching or teaching of the Apocalypse of John, because they tend later on, in the beginning, they tend for many hundreds of years, they tend to believe that that was not valid and the nature of God. It was not.
Thank you, Sister Anastasia.
1 second. Episcopalian Church and the Church of England, they have it in the canon, but they do not. At least they did not. And thank you very much.
Yeah, so you raised a number of important questions, and just to very briefly, so in my introductory presentation to this series, I think I show that many readers think that the message of Revelation differs from the rest of the New Testament, that they in some ways think that it is a throwback to a primitive view of God in the more in the Old Testament. A very astute scholar even says that Revelation theology falls below the best of the Old Testament, and there are more negative views even than that. Nietzsche has commented on it, and one of the writers says that Revelation is the Judas of the New Testament. So there are many disparaging views. Now, the defining image in Revelation of the revelation of God in Jesus is in chapter 5, where there is that book sealed with 7 seals, and the only one who can open it is the lamb that was killed with violence. And the lamb in Revelation is the way God is defined. The lamb is a defining image for God, and one should probably always, where that term is found, say the lamb that was killed with violence. That is repeated several times in chapter 5, that he resolves the cosmic conflict, whatever the issue could be in Revelation 5. The person who can untangle it is the lamb that was killed with violence. So the idea that Revelation is a kind of step down from high quality theology in the New Testament, I would contest that and say it's the opposite. It is a great clarifier, and in some ways driving home in the most unmistakable language how God is defined in that book. The lamb that was killed with violence, he has what it takes to take the book, to break the seals, to open the scroll, and to untangle the existential questions that this book is interested in. So yes, and then you have a contest over this book in various theological traditions, but it has ended up in the canon, and I am happy for that. We also may have to factor in that some writings from the early church, maybe, for example, about Origen in the third century, that those writings have been lost. We don't have them, so we don't know the whole story of it, and so that there we are. But this book will be redeemed and will be understood on the terms of its own message. So that's where we are, and I am saying that, yes, in that most pivotal scene in Revelation 5, God, you can say that the book that is sealed with 7 seals is in some ways a book of revelation within the book of Revelation, and Jesus is not only the one who breaks the seals, he is also the main revelation. The lamb that was killed with violence is the revealer. There is also the most important part of the revelation. So I don't have the slightest reservations about the clarity of the theology of Revelation is a God who solves the cosmic conflict in the form of a figure who was killed by violence and not as a perpetrator of violence.
Oh, thank you so very much, very, very much. And as always, reading your books has been really knowledge and inspiration. And you helped me a lot today. I hadn't heard your previous. I appreciate it. And I have to say, your command in the Greek is amazing. It's excellent.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the iPhone, 845.
That's me, McKinley, Eduardo.
Great, thank you. Please go ahead.
Sigve, I watched your video, rereading Revelation, and I really appreciate your presentation. It's a good job you did. I have the idea of maybe adding a little bit. Retrieving the vision of healing, as the subtitle. And can you see on Revelation 3:20, when it says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and open the door, I will supper with him and he with me." Can you see, according to my understanding of supper, the Lord's Supper is a process of healing? I remember reading in Desire of Ages that it was the purpose of healing the spirit of the disciples. Can you see? I remember your comment in a decade ago. I shared with you the subject of the Lord's Supper, open communion or closed communion, and you said much water has run into the ocean. I guess I understand what you mean, but can you see on the retrieving the vision of healing, the Lord's Supper as a healing? That's my comment.
Yeah, well, that's a good comment. So, yeah, I think that the notion that there is someone knocking on the door and saying, "If you let me in, I will sit down and we will have supper. We will have a meal together. That you with he with me and I with him, or she with me or I with her." You know, that is a Johannine way of thinking, that kind of reciprocity, and the notion of a communion meal there, and of real communion in a generic sense, is very strong in that verse. So yes, I think that is a vision of healing. It is a relational healing. And it is also healing of our misconceptions about God, which is the main burden of this book. And for the topic we had today in that video, that whether we initiate contact with God, whether humans want to find God or whether God wants to find us, I think is answered in that image, that Jesus is making house calls, he's knocking on doors, and he is initiating contact with humans. more than we are initiating contact with him. You know, in some ways, he seems to hesitate and wonder, will anyone open the door? You know, I'm here, I'm knocking. So I think that is also, supports the idea that the book of Revelation is a book from a God who makes contact and wishes to communicate with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tonstad. Okay, Peter.
Thank you again for your presentation. I'm trying to, okay, it's all right. Thank you again for your presentation. I have a comment in regard to the first question, who? And I understood you mentioned that a lot of scholars are against the fact that, recognize that John the Beloved is the author of the book. But you made powerful arguments in favor of that he is the author of the book. In addition to the proofs that you mentioned, I will add another one, and I'd like to hear your opinion about it. In the Gospels is mentioned one time a discussion between Jesus and Peter. When Jesus is telling Peter, revealing him the death he's going to die. And immediately following this comment was a question, what about this one? And the question was asked about John the Beloved. When Jesus, his answer was, well, what is about, what is to you that if I want him to be still to live until I'll come? Could this be a reference to Jesus revealing himself, coming to John when he was on the island of Patmos? And of course, you didn't mention arguments of these scholars that were against John the author. The textual analysis, context analysis, whatever. I think it will be interesting if you will add a few to make a more balanced examination of the book with those pro and those against. And in regard also in relation to this, I was thinking also to Rodney question. You mentioned that Irenaeus, the father of the church father Irenaeus, is in favor of arguing that John the Revelator was the author of the book. If you have knowledge about a comment that Irenaeus made about how some of these churches received it, or other church father. I have another question. If it's
thank you. Peter, let's let Dr. Tonstad deal with the first two observations, and then we'll come back to you after on.
Yeah, of course. What I said in this presentation on the who question is way too a big shortcut. But the problem is that to settle it and to say, you know, that there was one author, then you have of the gospel and the book of Revelation, you have to establish first, I suppose, who is the author of the Gospel of John. And that's where the main hurdle is in some ways for the name John, because the source or the attribution in the Gospel of John is never to John. Is never named John. Is always named the beloved disciple, the disciple whom Jesus loved. That is mentioned 5 times in the Gospel of John. That he is and at the end of the Gospel it says he is the source. We owe it to him that we have this book, and we believe that his testimony is true. But scholars do not agree that John is there is no consensus that John is the son of Zebedee. So you have to make that case first and settle that. And there are 3, 4, 5 other candidates for the authorship of the Gospel of John. Now it's easier in Revelation because there is an I, John, in Revelation. So there is self-identification as John. Is that John one of the 12 disciples? Is that John the beloved disciple? So my view that the way out of that is to see the books as coming from the same authorship. That is not the scholarly consensus. That is the view of the early church. It is the church view of Irenaeus, but it is not. It's not. There is no unanimity either in the early church on that subject, because there is another John candidate, John the Elder, and one of my mentors, Richard Bauckham, thinks that there is a John the Elder in the picture, and who is not one of the 12 disciples. So yes, that question deserves a much longer treatment. I gave it a much longer treatment in the first draft of my commentary, but I had to cut away a lot of that because I had too many pages. So. But I think we will have to come up with plausible options. The main reason why scholars think that it is not plausible that these books came from the same hand is that the language is so different. The style of writing is different. But I showed a couple of thematic parallels. I could have shown many more, and those thematic parallels are, to me, contribute, or they are, to me, evidence for the view that you could have the same source. So I just wish to say in conclusion that yes, you need a much bigger presentation than the one I gave. I agree with you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rodney, let's come back to you. And again, inviting others who might have a question or so to join the queue.
Sigve, candidly, I'm an intentional slow learner on the matter of revelation and the process of revealing. I find this material still quite oblique and nowhere near reaching a definition of transparency. In fact, I would, as an interpreter, I think you are a big part of the modern day revealing. Your book is exhaustive in its research and the points that it would make, and has no tie to the revelation that I was taught in high school and in college. And so I want to know what you think about the nature of ongoing revealing, of which you and others are part of, and in that there may be more to be revealed. Some of this obliqueness will be cut away. So to my question there would be, in your book, of which I'm about 80% of the way through, is there anything that you would change or alter, or have you had further revelation and understanding on the book of Revelation since you wrote your book? And Sigve, I really think you can respond to this too.
No,
You always leave me thinking we need to go for a deep walk, a long walk deep into the woods and find a log to sit down on and have a talk about what do you really think?
well, I thank you for everything you said. I have I thought of new things? Are there some things I wish to have done better or different? And the answer is yes, 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 yes. On everything, you know, you at some point you say now, you know, you have to stop. I value detail. I think the more you can, you know, it's not just the devil that is in the details. God is there too, in a way. You know, that there is a richness to detail, textual detail, nuances, and so on. David Aune, in his word biblical commentary on Revelation, he gets to write 3 volumes. And R.H. Charles, you know, 100 years ago, he wrote 2 volumes. And Greg Beale, he has a commentary of 1,100 pages, you know. So do I wish I could have written a bigger book and allowed myself the luxury of exploring other things? I really, yes, I would have liked to. I would have liked to have less constraints on the length, but that's what we had. There are some things I have seen more clearly since I wrote it. I now can see much more clearly that when it says to release the angels that are bound at the river Euphrates in Revelation 9, in connection with the 7 trumpets, that is the 6th trumpet. There is a message to release the angels that are bound at the river Euphrates, and they were ready for the hour and day and month and year. I am now very convinced that those are evil angels, and that there is restraint upon evil angels there, and I could have made that more clear when I wrote it, you know, and there are other things too, many other things. So you know, but it is risky. I would have liked to write a topical book on Revelation more than a commentary, because a topical book gives you a freer hand. There are some things you can do in a topical approach that you can't do in a commentary. So you know, but I am anticipating that I won't live long enough to do that, because I have some other things I wish to do too. But I would have liked to do that. a companion volume to a commentary as a topical one, and in that one could also deal more in depth with some of the differences between my approach and the traditional Adventist approaches. You know, I think that Revelation is still a book that could have a significant role to play in the identity formation of our faith world, but it has to be different from the usual way. It has to be different.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Dana, Peter, because you've spoken before. Since Dana hasn't asked a question, let me go to Dana first, and then I'll come to you, and then Sister Anastasia. And then I would like to use a sheriff's privilege and ask a question after Sister Anastasia. Okay, Dana.
Hi, first, thank you so very much for the presentation, Dr. Tonstad, and it made me, it took me back to the classroom, and your classes were maybe the most engaging, and I was so happy to find somebody that reads the book of John the way I do. And thank you for still believing that at least the beloved disciple is the author of both books. And I believe we are trying to prove that the one who reads the Gospel of John has also read the Revelation. And the truth is, the proof, it comes the other way, because the book of Revelation is so much alike to the Gospel of John that John, proves that the Gospel is written by John. You know, so the style proves the similarities, and John proves the Gospel. But anyway, thank you so very much. And for everybody that is a little afraid by the book of Revelation, like maybe I was growing up, I want to say that there is so much hope in it. Revelation 21, the first 4 or 5 verses are the verses that I read not only at every funeral, but I read at every time I stand at the bedside of a person that's dying. Because no matter what we go through in this life, no matter the losses, no matter the pain, there is hope that one day God will dry all our tears. So this is what I find hope in every moment of my life. And I don't know if I should share the whole story with you. The truth is, my house burned on Thursday. So literally, it's not a joke. I didn't put it on Facebook. I didn't even tell my mom until this morning. But as I didn't want to give up my presentation of Dr. Tonstad because I care about him so much and about his writing and about his theology. So but I had to do some things, and that's why I wasn't present with my face here. And I was thinking that I have experienced the fire. And I still believe that there is hope and that God will dry all our tears. So thank you so much for giving us this hope, giving every one of us this hope. And I hope that every person that was present here today will take this hope forward and will change the way we view not only the book of Revelation, but also God through the book of Revelation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. So let me just say that whatever you felt about my class, it was a greater privilege for me to have a student like you in my class than anything else. So I felt very privileged, and I learned a lot from you. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Dana, for sharing. Thank you, Dr. Tonstad. Peter.
You mentioned that at the time when the book of Revelation was written, there was not an apocalyptic genre. And we put this in connection with your interpretation of the book, that I understood it's more idealistic interpretation. That is, that basically denies any specific historical fulfillment and is more in favor of a spiritual truth. That's my question.
Yeah, the question of genre is very big, and that it's big in relation to all literature, and in some ways, whenever we open a book, we make some assumptions about the genre of what we are reading, and scholars call that the determination of genre gives you understanding before you start reading. It is a kind of pre-understanding or for understanding. So the issue of genre is not unimportant, but and one should not contest necessarily that there are similarities between Revelation and other so-called non-canonical apocalypses. there are similarities in those, you know, so you could say, well, let us lump them in the same genre. You know, the usual understanding of apocalyptic literature is that it is a form of crisis literature, that something is happening in the world and people are trying to generate a meaningful response to that crisis, you know, whatever the crisis might be, you know. But already at that point, Revelation has a problem, because, and you can see it in the writings of Adela Yarbrough Collins and another female Revelation scholar in our time, Elizabeth Schüssler Fiorenza, you know, because the situation of Revelation is ambiguous. Was there a crisis or wasn't there? Some of the towns in the churches in Asia Minor, they are just on cruise control. There is nothing, no sense of crisis. They are prosperous. They have need of nothing, you know. So if you say that part of the generic, the cause of this type of literature is that there is a sense of crisis, maybe a real crisis or a perception of crisis. You could say that Revelation has a perception of crisis. There is no crisis, but maybe Revelation perceives there to be one. But I try to say, and I wish I could have said it better and clearer, that Revelation does not seem to me to conform to that notion that there is a need in the human situation. Of course, there is a need, but there is much more of this, that there is an initiative from above, that God initiates contact with humans. God wants to be known. He is a known maker. He is a making himself known kind of God. And I'd like to put it into that paradigm to see it. And then, of course, the topic about which God wants us to know is God. You know, it's a theological errand, and I would prove that by Revelation 19, the rider on the white horse, who has a name that no one knows but himself, and who is coming on a mission of revealing to us that name, and the most the most defining image of that revelation is that he has come to us as the lamb that was killed with violence, you know. And so we can take our stand on that one. I take my stand on that one, because many people who read this book thinks that it depicts a God who is himself a perpetrator of violence, and my fellow interpreters in the Adventist community believe that too, and I don't agree with them. I think we have some battle lines there, if I may say so.
If I may.
Thank you. Peter, I wonder if I can, okay, very quickly.
It's your interpretation, idealistic interpretation, more kind of allegorical interpretation, like good versus evil, and an interpretation that denies any historical consummation?
No, it doesn't deny historical consummation. It hesitates to apply to in terms of claims to historical specificity. Let me just your question is a very good question, so let me and I'm happy for it. So in the trumpet sequence, there is, in the fifth trumpet, the sixth trumpet, there is a star that fell down from heaven, and he opens the bottomless pit, the abyss. You know these texts very well. And then the world turns dark. Then the darkness turns into locusts. the locust turns into scorpions, the scorpions turns into horses, the horses have heads in the front and in the tail, and they have heads and they have mouths, and the text says that with them they inflict harm. These are very bizarre images. Uriah Smith will say about those images that this is Islam. This is the Ottoman Empire. This is, or the Saracens. This is, the rise of Muhammad and Islam, and he will apply these symbols to Turkey, to Ottoman realities. And I do not agree with that for sure. I think that it depicts a demonic reality in the world, that the hypercharged, bizarre imagery is precisely to portray to us a demonic reality. And the Ottoman Turks are certainly not adequate. That is not an adequate historical referent for the aspirations of the symbols in this text. And so you could say, well, so Adventists, for example, now have abandoned that, and they say, oh, it wasn't the Ottomans, it was secularism, it was communism, it was socialism, it was nihilism, 10 isms. And again, attempting a kind of historical specificity that seems to me to trivialize the language. That is what we're saying. I do not think that my interpretation should be called idealistic. It could be called cosmic conflict interpretation if you wish to do that. But mostly I think it should be called a faithful reading of the text of Revelation, with no other name attached to it, that I take the linguistic idiom of this book seriously. And the place where I can most easily win that argument is actually in Revelation chapter 9, because those proposed reference there are so clearly inadequate in relation to the symbols of the book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tonstad. Simona, since you're hosting, we are past a little bit 12:30 California time. I'm going to recommend that we do, I think Sister Anastasia that wanted a question in there, if she can do it briefly.
Very quick,
Then,
very quick.
okay, just hold on a minute. And then if you don't mind me also asking my question, then we can close, but I'll defer to you.
No problem. Yes.
Sister Anastasia.
Yes, first of all, I agree with Dr. Townsend that I don't want to brag about myself, but I am a certified linguistics and comparative literature critic. And absolutely, his scholarship is not idealistic. It's very much into the language, the theology, etc. I also want to say, I know by experience that what he's doing and he has done is very difficult. It's very difficult and very courageous to be, after studying and working so hard, to disagree and show with the prevalent or the original or the traditional of the interpretation on the book of Revelation, that from personal experience and as a scholar, I feel is so destructive the way that it had been translated denominationally explained. And I have the question. Dr. Townsend, first of all, I thank you, and it meant a lot to me today, has been revealed a lot, and I'll study and thank you. I want to ask you, what do you think, and I'm sorry we were not able to listen to your previous things, and I don't have your book on the subject. What do you believe about the mark of the beast for those that worship on Sunday? Because as early as 4 years ago, not from Loma Linda, extremely high up Adventists and educationally had made a statement, but both myself, because I happen to keep the Sabbath and also worship on Sunday, people like me or my family in Greece, my father and so on, they will never see the new creation because they have the mark of the beast. And I think it's not only, and some gentlemen last time I were there said, well, that's your experience. And I want to tell you, as one that has been in there and on the outside, it's a very big block of people coming or relating to the Adventist Church. It's very destructive.
Thank you, Sister Anastasia. Thank you.
Well, I have written a book about the Sabbath, and I have a chapter in that book under the title, The Confrontation of Signs, a conflict that boils down to competing signs, competing symbols. Because Revelation seems to do that, you know, the seal of God, the mark of the beast, that those are representations that in some ways epitomize the two sides of the conflict, and that the mark of the beast is going to be enforced coercively, and those who don't take it, they will be killed, and it's very, very harsh, very determined. And then to protect against that reality, then there is the sealing of the believers that you see in Revelation 7, and that is mentioned again in Revelation 14, that they with those who stand on Mount Zion and are triumphant and so on. So the importance of these symbols on strictly literary terms is huge, but how to apply it in historical reality, in our lived reality, is another matter. And to sort of throw out very, very cheap labeling and antagonistic applications is not is not good, and it isn't necessary, and it is unwarranted. And I, you know, for the role that Seventh-day Adventists envision for the Sabbath as this kind of seal of God, I think that theological understanding has to first do some more homework on the meaning of the Sabbath. I have a long version for that and a short one, but in the Adventist view of things, the Sabbath is mostly a divine commandment. And I think in my reading of the Gospel of John, especially, the Sabbath is primarily divine commitment. And if you see Sabbath as divine commitment, I could see it having a role in the end to have a view of God as the God who commits, the God who demands of himself sacrifice and service and self-giving. That would be meaningful, and then that there could be some kind of competition there. But let me just say, I would like to walk back that type of confrontational language in the present time for those realities and those, you know, various communal practices. I don't think that is a good idea and is warranted, you know. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And blessed
Okay.
Sabbath.
Okay. So a quick observation in my comment and question. So again, I just want to highlight, as I did last week, that Dr. Tonstad has had an interest and pursued this interest in the book of Revelation since adolescence, and this just really intrigues me. His work has broadened the scope of our approach to Revelation, including, you know, the classical Adventist treatment. I would like to encourage all of us to watch all 24 or so of his presentations. That's what I plan to do, and to reread Revelation as well. Okay, here is the intro to my question. In her presentation on Revelation, Dr. Collins sort of mentioned, and I critiqued what I felt was an unsupported characterization of the book of Revelation
she suggested that in her conclusion, and perhaps it was just for that presentation, and she might have a different view, but or more expansive view. But in her conclusion, she said that the book and John's writings were informed by cosmic and cultural myths of John's time. Giving your perspective on the divine transparency that characterizes John's work, and the constant refrain in the book, I saw, and the link that you made to Daniel, make known. What do you make of Dr. Collins's characterization of Revelation?
Well, I have read several of her books on Revelation. She wrote her dissertation on Revelation, and it was published as far back as 1976 on the theme of cosmic conflict in Revelation. She has done excellent work on that topic. She and that her dissertation is very important. She tries to see, or she uses other ancient myths, Greek, Ugaritic, other things. She sees the myths of cosmic combat that she thinks are quite similar to Revelation's story of cosmic combat. So, and she is right that these what should I say, traditions, mythologies outside the Bible, that they have these stories of cosmic combat, and she describes what these stories are in great detail. So is there a case for that, the similarity of these extra-biblical myths, and that they, in some ways, that there is a kind of influence of those myths on Revelation? And I just want to say one thing about that, that it isn't enough to show similarities. You must also show differences, you know. So you can say, well, that is similar, that is similar, that is similar. You know, so are there some things that aren't similar? Is there some differences? Is the figure of Satan equal to some of the figures in the ancient mythologies that she uses? And I think she tends to draw on similarities that are not quite as striking as she would like them to be, and to exclude or to ignore the differences, because I think the Revelation story, the so-called mythological aspects of Revelation story, is much more subtle than what you have in so there is you have these in Greek mythology, for example. There is one where you have a figure who steals the solar horses and runs off with the solar horses and makes havoc in the world. And then, of course, the higher deity can strike down that figure immediately, and the problem is solved. And the cosmic conflict theme in Revelation is much more complicated and theologically intricate and theologically sophisticated. So in some ways, I think she opens to us a world of to understanding how the ancients thought about these matters. But its explanatory power for the book of Revelation, I think, is quite weak. And I have written something about that in my dissertation, Saving God's Reputation. But I want to be a learner from Adela Collins too. And I have learned a lot from her too. I do not want to just be dismissive and say, because I find something there with which I disagree, I'm not going to consider it or learn from it. There isn't anything I have read that I didn't learn something from.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Simona?
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation and insightful discussion. I would posit maybe a little bit different view on this last question, and that's that God has been trying to reveal himself from the very beginning. And there is no reason to think that the only people and the only place where he tries to reveal himself is in the Bible. So the same elements that we are seeing in other cultures, in other stories, may be remnants of a different revelation, or I should say maybe the same revelation that got corrupted with time and retelling versus, something that was written and came to us in more or less a final form. So there is no reason why God would not be trying to reveal his character to entire humanity. And if we go from the beginning, just a couple of examples when God goes to Moses and Moses is asking, okay, so who should I tell you are? And he says, I am who I am. So he's revealing himself, it kind of parallels this, the horseman whose name nobody knows but himself, right? There are other parts, when God is speaking to prophets, he introduces himself. This is who I am. I'm the God who is, and then, comes an explanation who is caring and kind, and God that comes in a thin whisper. So all these elements of God's revelation are attempts to kind of break through this wall that has been erected between us and God. And there, in different times, there are different means how God is trying to do this. And the language that he speaks is not always immediately recognizable to us, but there are elements of it that are something that our soul recognizes, that we respond to, and that we can see. When I was thinking about something I would share with you, I ran into two texts that I would like to share with you at the end of today's presentation. One is from the book by Abraham Joshua Herschel, Man is Not Alone. And the subtitle is Let the Insight Be. Our awareness of God is a syntax of the silence, in which our souls mingle with the divine, in which the ineffable in us communes with the ineffable beyond us. It is the afterglow of years in which soul and sky are silent together, the outgrowth of accumulated certainty of the abundant, never-ebbing presence of the divine. All we ought to do is to let the insight be, and to listen to the soul's recessed certainty of its being a parenthesis of the immense script of God's eternal speech. The great insight is not attained when we ponder or infer the beyond from the here. In the realm of the ineffable, God is not the hypothesis derived from logical assumptions, but an immediate insight, self-evident as light. He is not something to be sought in the darkness with the light of reason. In the face of the ineffable, he is the light. When the ultimate awareness comes, it is like a flash, arriving all at once. To meditative minds, the ineffable is cryptic, inarticulate, dots, marks of secret meaning, scattered hints to be gathered, deciphered, and formed into evidence, while in moments of insight, the ineffable is a metaphor in a forgotten mother tongue. Thus, awareness of God does not come by degrees, from timidity to intellectual temerity, from guesswork, reluctance to certainty. It is not a decision reached at the crossroads of doubt. It comes when, drifting in the wilderness, having gone astray, we suddenly behold the immutable polar star. Out of endless anxiety, out of denial and despair, the soul bursts out in speechless crying. And the second text I would like to share with you is a poem by Rabindranath Tagore. I woke and I found his letter with the morning. I do not know what it says, for I cannot read. I shall leave the wise man alone with his books. I shall not trouble him, for who knows if he can read what the letter says. Let me hold it to my forehead and press it to my heart. When the night grows still and stars come out one by one, I will spread it on my lap and stay silent. The rustling leaves will read it aloud to me. The rushing stream will chant it, and the 7 wise stars will sing it to me from the sky. I cannot find what I seek. I cannot understand what I would learn, but this unread letter has lightened my burdens and turned my thoughts into song. And I think I love the knowledge, but in all our knowledge, we encounter the mystical, the parts that we don't understand. And these parts also speak to us. Before our benediction today, Dana, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. This might have been a terrible thing for you, and you are a member of our family. We care about you and we love you. And let's talk after this. What can we do to help you?
You know, let me tell you something. I was surprised that I shared this with you because I share it with very few people other than the witnesses, you know, but it speaks of how much I feel that you are my community. And what I ask for you is I ask for your prayers for good health for my husband, for wisdom for my daughter, and for courage and strength and sanity for me. And, you know, at the end of the day, what's important is that all people in my family are okay, all pets are okay. And I lived with little, which, so I'm not scared of that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
May God's Spirit surround you and those whom you love. Rest now in that calm embrace. Let your hearts be warmed and all storms be stilled by the whisper of his voice. I wish you a good week. And for those of you who wish to stay after the recording is stopped, we have usually a very nice and vigorous discussion in our digital Footless Potluck. Until next week.